Pacific Ocean, May 1944, somewhere east of the Marianas. The sky was a blinding white-blue dome, broken only by black flak bursts and the twisting trails of spiraling aircraft. Beneath it, the carrier USS Hancock C-19 cut through the swells at full speed, its deck trembling with the rhythm of launching fighters into a battle already raging miles ahead. 30-year-old Lieutenant Jack Mercer, pilot of a Grumman F6F Hellcat, gripped the stick as he rolled into formation. The sweat slid down the back of his neck despite the cold air spilling into the cockpit vents. He checked his fuel, checked his ammo, and tapped the lucky silver coin wedged beside his throttle. Ahead, rising from a cluster of low clouds, were the dark silhouettes of Japanese carrier aircraft, returning from a strike that hadn't quite gone as planned. The Hellcats had been scrambled to intercept. Mercer pushed his throttle forward. His wingman Ensign Porter crackled over the radio. "Jack, there's a lot of them." Jack didn't answer. He was too busy counting. 9, no 12, and climbing. The fight began instantly. Tracer fire stitched across the sky like burning stitches. Planes rolled, twisted, vanished into clouds. A Zero snapped past Mercer's canopy in a flash of silver and red. Jack rolled after it, guns blazing. The dogfight became chaos. Tight spins, high G-turns, flashes of sunlight off wings and canopies. But Mercer got the kill, sending the Zero spiraling into the ocean. That's when the second one hit him. A burst of 7.7 millimeters, rounds hammered into his right wing root, then walked across his fuselage like angry footsteps. The canopy cracked. The engine barked. A fuel line ruptured, spraying vapor across the cockpit. Porter shouted, "Jack, you're hit. Bail out." But Jack didn't reach for the chute. He kept flying. Then a third plane hit him, then a fourth. When the fight finally ended, Mercer was alone in the sky, the last Hellcat still moving in a patch of air filled with falling debris. His engine sputtered, coughing smoke. His control surfaces felt mushy. He could smell hot fuel and burnt paint. He finally looked at his wings and froze. There were holes, hundreds of them, some big enough to put a fist through, some shredding the trailing edges into ribbons. The radio crackled again. "Mercer, do you copy? Can you make it back?" He swallowed hard. "I don't know." Because the impossible truth was this. His Hellcat had taken 230 hits, more than any plane had any right to survive. And the Japanese pilots who had been hammering at him were already reporting back in disbelief. But Mercer wasn't dead yet. The fight wasn't over. And somehow, through fire, shredded control surfaces, a wounded engine, and a cockpit held together by luck, he was about to attempt one of the most impossible carrier landings of the entire Pacific War. Smoke curled from the engine cowling as Jack Mercer leveled his Hellcat. The whole aircraft vibrated with a sickening buzz, an unbalanced prop, a warped crankshaft, maybe both. Every instinct told him to shut the engine down and bail out. But when he glanced below, he saw the endless Pacific stretching to the horizon, sunlight glittering off the waves like broken glass. Even if he jumped, rescue wasn't guaranteed. Not here. Not with Japanese submarines prowling. Not with his fleet repositioning. His only chance was the carrier. Porter's voice cracked through the radio again, thin with panic. "Jack, talk to me. Is the engine still turning?" Mercer coughed smoke from the cabin, wiping soot from his lips. "Barely." He pulled the stick left. Nothing. Right. A delayed, shuddering response. The right aileron, hit by multiple bursts, was barely attached. The left was flapping like a shredded flag. The Hellcat wasn't flying so much as vibrating through the air. Jack forced a grim smile. Well, at least gravity still works. Porter didn't laugh. Assessing the damage in midair, Mercer leaned sideways, peering at his wings. It was worse than he thought. Hole number 1, a fist-sized gap in the leading edge. Hole number 23, a jagged tear near the gun bay, wires exposed. Hole number 57, a softball-sized crater near the fuel tank, miraculously not ignited. Hole number 114, one of the flaps was nearly sawn in half. Hole number 230, the vertical stabilizer looked like lace, dozens of fragments having passed through, and those were only the visible ones. His radio antenna was gone. His belly was peppered like a steel drum. His landing hook looked bent. Porter's breath crackled over the radio. "Jack, how are you still airborne?" Mercer's tone was dry, by stubbornness and poor decision-making. Japanese pilots watching in disbelief. Several miles behind him, Japanese survivors of the dogfight watched the Swiss-cheesed Hellcat limping away. Reports buzzed across their radios. Impossible, plane should be falling. He takes no shoe. Why? Engine burning. American planes still flying. Cannot explain. One pilot marked the kill log as damage beyond recovery, assuming Mercer would ditch or explode before reaching his carrier. Another insisted, "No, he flies still, like ghost plane." They were right. Something about the Hellcat, its rugged airframe, reinforced spar design, thick armor plate, made it a beast at absorbing punishment. But 230 holes? That was pushing the limits of aviation physics. The fuel problem. A warning light blinked. Fuel pressure dropping. A round had torn through a supply line. And every minute brought him closer to flame out. Mercer throttled back to reduce consumption. The engine sputtered but held. He switched tanks, and the engine hiccuped violently before stabilizing. "Come on, sweetheart," he murmured to the wounded machine. "Just hold together a little longer." The Pacific wind whistled through the holes in the fuselage, producing an eerie flute-like moan. The Hellcat felt fragile, like a bird with broken wings trying to remember how to fly. Locating the carrier, or what's left of it, Mercer scanned the horizon. Nothing. Then, a thin sliver of gray smoke. Another. And then, the unmistakable rectangular outline of a flight deck rising from the ocean like a metal island. USS Hancock. He keyed the radio. "Hancock, this is Lieutenant Jack Mercer. Hellcat 314. Requesting emergency recovery. I'm shot to hell and low on fuel." A tense pause. Then the LSO landing signal officer responded. "Mercer. Say again. Did you say emergency recovery? Your transponder's barely readable." "That's because half the plane is missing." The LSO's tone sharpened. "Understood. Divert south 10 degrees and hold for approach pattern." Mercer coughed. "I can't hold anything. I'm coming straight in." Another pause. Longer this time. Finally, "Roger that. Hancock will clear the deck." The carrier reacts. On the USS Hancock, crewmen scrambled. Deckhands ran to remove loose gear. Fire suppression crews rolled out hoses. Crash barriers were raised. The LSO marked the incoming aircraft with a red priority flag. "Flying wounded. High risk. Prepare for deck crash." Sailors gathered at safe stations to watch the incoming speck on the horizon. One muttered, "How the hell is that thing still airborne?" Another replied, "Hellcats die hard." A third shook his head. "That plane ain't flying, friend. It's just falling slowly." Mercer prepares for a landing attempt no one believes is possible. Jack tightened his harness, loosened his grip, lowered his damaged flaps. Only one responded. The Hellcat lurched to the side violently. Okay, no flaps. He tried the landing gear lever. The left one dropped. The right one hesitated, then stuck halfway. He pumped the manual override. Metal groaned. The wheel dropped sideways. "Great," Jack muttered. "Two wheels, one functional." He reached for the landing hook control. The hook dropped, but twisted, partially bent. He laughed bitterly. Full house. Porter came over the radio again. "Jack, you sure about this?" Mercer stared at the distant carrier deck. "No, but I'm out of better ideas." He aligned with the Hancock, engine gasping, airframe rattling. Every control surface barely responding. His plane wasn't a Hellcat anymore. It was a damaged kite, held together by rivets, adrenaline, and a prayer. And in part two, he would attempt a landing that every pilot on that deck would later describe as impossible. Absolutely impossible. The USS Hancock loomed larger in Jack's shattered canopy. Its deck crews lining the rails, bracing themselves as if waiting for a meteor to land. No one had ever seen a Hellcat in this condition, still airborne, smoking, whistling from dozens of punctures, wings trembling like torn fabric. Jack eased the throttle forward. The engine coughed once, belched black smoke, then caught again with a shaky growl. He whispered to it, "Easy now, just hold together for 30 more seconds." The carrier radio crackled sharply. Hellcat 314. Be advised, your landing pattern is unstable. Your right gear looks bad. Hook may not catch. Jack wiped soot from his eyes. Copy Hancock. I'll take whatever luck you've got. A flight deck officer muttered off mic. He's gonna hit the deck sideways. That hook won't grab a damn thing. Another voice. Why isn't he ditching? The LSO answered bluntly. Because he died before the rescue crew found him. Now shut up and watch. Last second adjustments. Jack dipped left. The plane dipped too far. He corrected right. The plane barely responded. He felt the entire wing structure flex, protesting the maneuver. Come on, come on. The Hancock cut across the waves at full speed, generating the wind he needed. White spray kicked up from the bow as the carrier aligned into the wind for Jack's approach. The LSO held up his paddles, moving them with precise motions. Come left, left, hold, hold. A gust hit the Hellcat. The nose yawed violently. No, not now. Jack countered with rudder, but the control cables, frayed from bullet strikes, responded weakly. The plane dipped below the glide slope. Porter screamed through the radio. Jack, pull up. You're low. Jack muttered, I know. He yanked the throttle. The engine sputtered, coughed, and then miraculously surged back to life for a final burst. The Hellcat climbed just enough. The LSO dropped his paddles. Cut power. Cut now. Jack pulled the throttle back. The Hellcat began to sink toward the deck. Impact. The landing wasn't smooth. It wasn't controlled. It wasn't even a landing by normal naval standards. It was survival. Raw, brutal, ugly survival. The left landing gear touched first. Slammed down hard. Metal buckled. The right gear followed, skidding sideways. The Hellcat veered left, then right, then left again. Sparks erupted from the belly. The bent hook bounced off the deck, failed to catch wire number 1, number 2, or number 3. Crewman yelled. He missed wires. But then, clang. Wire number 4 snagged the twisted hook, barely. The Hellcat jerked violently backward as the cable screamed under tension. The plane skidded, sparks trailing behind it like a comet's tail. The right wing dipped, scraping the deck. Fuel dripped from ruptured lines. Smoke billowed out. Finally, it stopped. Silence swept the deck. A mechanic whispered, "Hold out." Another sailor crossed himself. He landed that thing. Emergency crew rushing. Fire crews sprinted toward the wrecked Hellcat. A chief petty officer pointed at the wings, shouting, "Get foam on that. Fuel's leaking." Jack's canopy was jammed, shot through by a round that had warped the rails. 2 deckhands pried it open with crowbars. When they lifted it free, smoke poured out. Jack exhaled a trembling breath. "Am I on deck?" A deckhand laughed in disbelief. "You're on deck, sir, in something that shouldn't even be called a plane." They helped him climb out. His legs nearly buckled, but he stayed upright, leaning on the wing that looked like perforated sheet metal. Sailors gathered around, gasping at the scale of damage. "Look at the stabilizer. There's nothing left. Count the holes. Someone count the damn holes. This airframe shouldn't even glide." A mechanic eventually returned with the tally. 230 holes. And that's just what we can see. Another sailor shook his head. That Japanese pilot must have emptied the whole damn sky into it. Jack managed a crooked grin. "And she still brought me home." Japanese reaction intercepted later. Hours later, naval intelligence intercepted stunned Japanese chatter. American plane survived impossible damage. "We hit him again and again, no fall. Hellcat is curse machine, cannot kill." One pilot insisted. "Should not fly, should not land, still does." One more problem. As crewmen inspected the Hellcat, the chief mechanic turned to Mercer with a grave expression. "Sir, he didn't just limp home with 230 holes." Jack frowned. "What now?" The chief held up a bent metal rod. "This is your elevator control linkage. It was severed halfway through." Jack blinked. "That means..." "Yes," the chief said. "You had no elevator authority." "Not really. You landed using throttle and luck." Another sailor added, "Sir, that wasn't a landing. That was a miracle wrapped in aluminum." Jack looked at the Hellcat. His Hellcat still smoking on the deck. Yeah, he whispered. Feels like it. As the deck crews swarmed around the crippled Hellcat, Lieutenant Jack Mercer leaned against the island superstructure, helmet off, sweat steaming in the cool Pacific wind. His heart was still pounding, not from fear, but from the aftershock of having done something no pilot trained for, no manual prepared him for, and no sane officer would ever recommend. Behind him, the Hellcat hissed and popped as its wounded engine cooled. The fuselage looked more like a sieve than a military aircraft. Fabric hung in tatters. Hydraulic fluid leaked in neon streaks. The right wing drooped under its own damaged weight, and the numbers kept coming in. 230 holes confirmed. Stabilizer compromised in 6 places. Aileron cables nearly severed. Fuel lines ruptured in 3 compartments. A young mechanic walked up wide-eyed, so your oil tank was 1 bullet away from detonating. Jack exhaled slowly. Just one. A look inside the cockpit. The chief mechanic, a grizzled veteran named Clancy, motioned Jack closer. Sir, you gotta see this. They climbed onto the wing, careful not to step through the wounded metal, and peered into the cockpit. Even Jack froze. The interior looked like a storm had torn through it. The instrument panel had 3 holes cleaned through it. The clock was shattered. The Euro compass hung loosely from its wiring. The left rudder pedal had a bullet embedded in it. His seat armor plate bore gouges where fragments had slid off. Clancy tapped the seat. You know this? 1 fragment came in right behind you, ricocheted off this armor. If it had hit an inch higher. Don't finish that sentence, Jack muttered. Behind them, sailors gathered, whispering. Look at that cockpit. He flew that. No way he could even see half his gauges. And they were right. Jack had flown almost blind, reconstructing the final moments. The LSO, clipboard in hand, approached with the landing report. Lieutenant, I ran the numbers. We measured your approach. Jack braced himself. The LSO blinked, stunned. You landed at 27 degrees off alignment. Your right gear was collapsing, and you touched down 12 feet short of the normal threshold. Jack frowned. That shouldn't be survivable. The LSO nodded. Correct. It shouldn't. He flipped a page. Also, your aileron response was delayed by almost a full second. You were flying with, well, momentum and hope. Jack managed a tired smile. Hope's not standard Navy issue. Last I checked. Why, the Hellcat survived. Later in the hangar deck, Clancy and 2 engineers began a deeper inspection. Their findings spread quickly through the ship. A junior engineer came running toward Jack. Lieutenant, you need to hear this. Jack followed him to the stripped-down fuselage. Clancy pointed at the spar running through the wing, a thick aluminum beam. This right here saved your life. Jack ran his fingers along the gouges. Explained. The Hellcat's wing spar is overbuilt. Grumman made it intentionally heavy. The Japanese anti-air rounds hit everything, but they couldn't break the spar. The younger engineer added, if you were flying a Zero or a Wildcat, you'd be dead twice over. Jack raised an eyebrow. So I lived because the plane was built like a flying brick? Clancy smirked. Exactly. The Hellcat ain't pretty, but she's tough. The terrifying truth. The controls failed mid-landing as they dug deeper into the wreck. Clancy uncovered the most shocking fact of all. He pulled a frayed, nearly severed cable taut. See this? Your elevator control cable. This thing snapped the moment your wheels touched the deck. Jack stared at it. You're telling me, if I had needed even 1 more second of pitch control, Clancy finished. You'd have slammed nose first into the deck barrier. Plane would have burst like a tin can. Boom, Jack's wingman, who had watched the entire landing from the deck, approached, face still pale. Jack. When you flared the nose, I saw the plane wobble like it wanted to die right there. Jack nodded slowly. It did want to die, but it waited, just long enough. Boone swallowed hard. I'll never complain about rugged Navy planes again. News spreads across the fleet. By evening, word had reached other carriers. Hellcat lands with 230 holes. Pilot survives insane damage. Japanese pilots stunned that American plane lived. Radio chatter passed between ships, carried fragments of awe. Did you see pictures? That plane shouldn't have even taxied. Is a pilot made of luck or steel? Aboard an escort destroyer. An officer muttered. 230 holes? Men flew home in a ghost with wings. Jack Mercer's quiet realization. Late that night, Jack stood alone on the flight deck, watching the ocean slide by beneath the moonlight. He touched the patched, soot-stained fabric of his flight suit. He inhaled the salt air. He ran a hand through his hair, still gritty with smoke from the cockpit. He whispered to himself, I should be dead. Not as fear, but as a statement of statistical truth. The Hellcat beside him, a twisted, perforated relic, seemed to whisper back, no, not today. Jack placed his hand on the battered fuselage one last time. Thanks for bringing me home, he murmured. The wind carried his words off into the darkness. But the truth remained. A plane that should not have flown did. A mission that should have ended in fire didn't. And a pilot that should have bailed out chose instead to fight physics and win. Word of Jack Mercer's impossible landing didn't stay confined to the USS Hancock for long. By dawn the next morning, sailors from destroyers, cruisers, and even other carriers were requesting permission to come aboard just to see the ruined Hellcat with their own eyes. And when they saw it, every reaction was the same. A silent whistle, a stunned shake of the head, a whispered, no way. The plane had become a legend overnight, still on the flight deck, still smelling of burnt oil, its metal skin peppered with wounds like some battle-scarred creature that refused to die. The Japanese debrief, hundreds of miles away, aboard a damaged Japanese carrier that had barely escaped the air battle. Officers held a briefing to analyze the engagement. 3 pilots, exhausted, bruised, shaken, reported the same bizarre observation. One pilot bowed his head. The American plane, we destroyed it many times, but it continued. Another spoke with disbelief thick in his voice. I saw fuel spraying from its side. I saw the tail break apart, but it would not fall. A senior officer slammed his fist on the table. No aircraft can endure that damage. You misjudged. But the third pilot shook his head fiercely. No, Commander. I emptied my guns into its wings, into its belly, into the cockpit area. The American did not jump. He kept fighting. The plane is, how you say, built from iron. The recorder documented the engagement as American fighter received catastrophic damage, but remained operational, cause unknown. Behind the official words lay the uncomfortable truth. They did not understand how the Hellcat survived. The Navy investigation team arrives. 2 days later, the Navy engineering team flew in by courier plane. They circled the deck, noting the battered Hellcat below. An officer murmured, that thing flew? In that condition? Another replied, it didn't fly. It refused to die. The investigators measured each hole, documented impact angles, and photographed every bullet path. They noted where rounds had severed control lines, penetrated armor, bent structural ribs, and shredded vital components. Their conclusion, pilot skill exceptional, aircraft durability beyond expected parameters, survival improbable but achieved through combination of structural redundancy, partial system functionality, and remarkable pilot control. But one line stood out more than any other. The most extraordinary factor was the pilot's refusal to abandon aircraft despite overwhelming damage. Jack's conversation with the Air Group Commander, Commander Rourke, head of the Hancock's Air Wing, summoned Jack to his office. The man was tough, stone-faced, carved from the old Navy mold. He didn't give out praise lightly. He slid the landing report across the desk. Jack, you shouldn't be here. Jack nodded. I know, sir. Rourke leaned forward. You flew a plane that had no business being in the sky. You made decisions I wouldn't have ordered, and your landing, he exhaled, was borderline insane. Jack braced himself. Was he about to be reprimanded? Then Rourke smiled, just barely. But you brought your plane home. You protected your wingman, and you saved us the victory marks on the Japanese side. He stood, offering his hand. That was the bravest damn flying I've ever seen. Jack shook his hand, humbled. Thank you, sir. Rourke wasn't done. That plane you rode in, she's done. We're shipping her home. They want to study every inch of that airframe. Jack raised an eyebrow. Think they'll learn anything? Rourke chuckled. Oh, they'll learn plenty. mostly about Hellcat's stubbornness. A moment on the flight deck. That evening, the sky burned orange as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Jack stood alone again beside his battered aircraft. The ship hummed underfoot, engines pushing them toward the next operation. Boone appeared beside him, hands in pockets. You know, he said quietly. Japanese radio intercepts say they were, what's the word, frightened by that plane. Jack didn't look away from the damaged fuselage. They weren't frightened by the plane. Boone frowned. Then what? Jack placed his hand on the shredded metal. They were frightened by the fact that it didn't stop fighting, even when it should have. The silence hung between them. Boone broke it with a small smile. Well, for what it's worth, the rest of us were pretty impressed too. Jack gave a tired laugh. Let's hope I never have to try that again. Preparing for what comes next, the Hellcat was eventually lowered into the hangar for transport home. Men touched it as they passed, patting the fuselage as if it were a living veteran of the Pacific. On the deck above, Jack prepped his replacement aircraft. Fresh paint, clean engine, flawless wings. A crewman asked, "You think this one will take a beating like your last bird?" Jack glanced upward, thoughtful. "I hope I never find out." But deep down he knew, planes don't make legends. Pilots do, and the next battle would come soon enough. For the next 2 days, the crew of the USS Hancock swore they could still smell smoke from Jack Mercer's destroyed Hellcat every time the hangar doors opened. The story of the ghost plane spread through the ship with the speed of superstition. Every man adding his own detail, his own emphasis, his own disbelief. Some said the Hellcat returned with fuel streaming like a waterfall. Others swore they'd counted over 300 holes. A few insisted they saw pieces of fabric fluttering where metal should have been. Jack corrected no one, because the truth was already unbelievable enough. Engineering team's final analysis. The Navy engineers delivered their final notes to the Air Group commander, and word quickly trickled down. The report confirmed 32 holes in the left wing, 29 in the right wing, 41 in the fuselage, 14 through the engine cowling, dozens more across the tail section, belly, and canopy frame. 124 of those rounds were armor-piercing. Many were tracer rounds that should have ignited spilled fuel. A few missed Jack's head or chest by centimeters. But the most astonishing finding was hidden in the structural notes. Despite catastrophic damage, the main wing spar held integrity due to Grumman's over-engineered design. Jack read that line twice. Boone slapped the page with the back of his hand. "See? This is why we fly Hellcats instead of toothpick Zeros." Jack smirked. The Zero wasn't built badly. It was built for maneuverability. Boone raised an eyebrow. And what was the Hellcat built for? Jack looked at the mangled fuselage resting on a transport cradle, surviving. A visit from the fleet admiral's representative. On the third day, an unexpected visitor arrived. A captain from the fleet staff, crisp uniform, no-nonsense demeanor. He approached Jack on the flight deck. "You're Lieutenant Mercer." "Yes, sir." The captain studied him for a long moment. "You landed a Hellcat that should have broken in half midair." "Sir, I just flew what I had." The man opened a folder. "The Admiral wants to know how you kept control authority with your elevator linkage severed." Jack shrugged lightly. Throttle trim tabs and a prayer. The captain blinked. "That's not in the manual." Jack cracked a tired smile. "No, sir. I improvised." The captain closed his folder. "Well, Lieutenant, whatever you improvise, it worked." He shook Jack's hand. "Expect your actions to be noted in official dispatches." Jack nodded once. "Thank you, sir." The Japanese perspective, days later. Radio intercepts collected by naval intelligence revealed Japanese astonishment bordering on folklore. One transcript read, "The American plane, we destroyed it, yet it lived. Their machines are demons." Another pilot insisted to his commander, "I fired until my guns were empty. Still he flew. Still he turned. Still he climbed." A third concluded, "Their planes are built by men who expect them to return from hell." The Japanese Navy began circulating internal memoranda, warning their pilots. Hellcats may continue flight even if gravely damaged. Do not assume destruction unless aircraft is observed to fall. It was the first time an enemy force formally acknowledged the Hellcat's terrifying durability. Jack's final moment with the ghost plane. When the time came to move the shredded Hellcat onto a transport ship bound for Pearl Harbor and then stateside, Jack was given one last chance to see it. He stood alone in the hangar, men working quietly in the background, the overhead lights casting long shadows across the warped, burned metal. Jack placed his palm on the dented fuselage, feeling the rough edges of bullet tears and shrapnel gouges. Boone walked up behind him. "You know," he said softly, "some pilots get memorials. Some get medals. Some get tall tales." Jack didn't look away from the twisted metal. "What do I get?" Boone smiled. "You get this. A plane that shouldn't have flown, shouldn't have fought, shouldn't have landed, and yet did all three because you refused to let go of the stick." Jack exhaled. "It wasn't just me. She did the work." Boone clapped him on the shoulder. "Don't tell the Navy you talked to your airplane. They'll ground you." Jack chuckled. "Fair point." A quiet night on deck. That night, Jack walked the deck as the moon cast a silver path across the water. The Pacific felt calmer, almost apologetic. He stared into the vast darkness, remembering the dogfight, the screaming engine, the burning fuel, the violent tremble of a wing that was barely still attached, and the landing, that impossible, physics-defying landing. He whispered to the night, "I'm still here." A gust of wind swept past him, carrying the scent of the sea and aviation fuel. Jack nodded to himself. Let's make the next one less exciting. But deep inside, he knew the truth. Not a single pilot on the Hancock would ever see a plane endure what his Hellcat had endured. And many would never forget the sight of that broken, bullet-riddled machine touching down. Not gracefully, not perfectly, but triumphantly, at dawn the next morning, with the ocean calm and the carrier slicing steadily through the swells. The ruined Hellcat was lowered into the hold. Sailors paused to watch it vanish into the elevator bay. A moment that felt strangely ceremonial, as if they were saluting a comrade who had fought its last battle. Lieutenant Jack Mercer stood by the railing, arms folded, eyes following the battered engine cowling until it disappeared from sight. The Pacific wind ruffled his hair, and for a moment he allowed himself to feel the weight of everything that had happened. He shouldn't have survived. He shouldn't have made it out of the dogfight. He shouldn't have flown more than 10 miles. And he absolutely should not have landed on a moving carrier deck. Yet he had, and not because he was invincible, but because the Hellcat, in all its rugged, riveted, overbuilt stubbornness, had refused to give up. Because his training instinct and sheer refusal to die kept him fighting through each sputter, each hole, each jarring hit. Because sometimes in war, survival is a negotiation between pilot and machine. And that day, both gave everything they had. What happened after? Jack continued flying sorties with the Hancock's Air Group, earning a reputation for calm under pressure. He never bragged about the landing. If anything, he downplayed it, insisting that any pilot would have done the same. But the Navy didn't forget. The Hellcat was shipped stateside, examined by engineers who traced bullet paths, measured torn spars, and marveled at the absurdity of its flight. It became a teaching tool, a living testament to American aircraft design, pilot resilience, and battlefield improvisation. New pilots were told, if you think your aircraft is too damaged to fly, remember the one that came home with 230 holes. As for the Japanese pilots who had attacked him, their recorded confusion became part of wartime intelligence reports, an acknowledgement that American fighter durability had reached almost mythic status. Jack Mercer's legacy. After the war, Jack became a flight instructor, passing on not only skills but humility. When asked about the day that made him a legend, he always gave the same answer. The plane did the hard part. I just held on. He lived a quiet life, raised a family, and kept one relic in his study, a small, jagged fragment cut from his Hellcat's fuselage. A reminder that life sometimes hangs on a few millimeters of steel and a few miles of courage. Today, his story survives in naval archives, museum placards, and the memories of the men who saw the impossible unfolding on that carrier deck. A plane that should have died, a pilot who refused to, and a landing that proved the line between disaster and miracle is sometimes just a heartbeat wide. Call TO Action US English. If this story inspired you, hit that like button so more viewers can discover these cinematic, forgotten war moments. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. and whether anyone in your family ever served in World War II or naval aviation. And if you enjoy dramatic, true-to-history war stories brought to life, subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss the next episode.